Hey, sewers, welcome to another Sewing Saturday live from Sew Lounge. I am so excited that you are here with me today on this kind of cold Saturday here in Texas. It's kind of crazy, but the running joke is that if you don't like the weather, just wait a little while because it'll change. And here it was like in the high 70s yesterday, and now it's in the 30s. So go figure. If you are joining me, please let me know where you're watching from. Say hi. I love to know where you are and how you're doing this lovely Saturday morning. I have my coffee ready to go in my super cute sewing mug, and I'm excited that you are here to join me. Let me switch over to the comments in case you are liking to comment. And hey, Karen, I'm glad you're so ready. I am feeling so ready too. It has been a kind of a long morning so far because I got up at 6:30, which is totally fine. I am working on editing a video for Sunday, and I get up early anyway. Not usually, I usually get up at 5, so sleeping in is 6:30. So, hey, Norma, thank you for joining us from California. I know it's very early for you there. So today we are going to be chatting about the love of sewing. And I'm going to be sharing some stories of when I first kind of tried to sew, when I kind of fell in love with it, and then when I kind of came back to it and realized it was an integral part of who I am, and that it just had to be something that I did regularly, because otherwise I was going, I won't say die, but it felt like my soul would be crushed. So if you've had that similar experience, I would love to hear from you. And if you are just joining in, say hi. Let me know where you're joining from. So I can greet you and pop your little comment up on the screen, because that's what I like to do to make sure everybody feels included. And I was thinking about when the first time I tried to sew. So I wanted to learn to sew when I was in 5th grade, because we had a states project. You may remember those if you went to school here in the 80s. I think everybody had to do a states and capitals project. So my state was Utah, and I had to do a presentation on a topic, which I chose paleontology. And I wanted to make like a white lab coat, but my grandma just kind of took over and said it was going to be faster. She did it, so she did it. So let's say hi to a few more people. Brenda is in South Carolina. Welcome, Brenda. Thanks for joining us this morning. Okay. Makey, I think I said it right this time. It is in the evening over there in Europe. So thank you for taking the time to join us. And let's see who else. We've got Diane, who's from Fort Worth. So you're just up 45 from me. And I'm sure it's colder there than it is here, because, it's always colder in North Texas. So I was just saying that the first time I wanted to learn to sew, and then grandma was kind of like, no, let me just do it. So I was like, okay, because, I was 10. And so then the next time I remember actually finding a tiny sewing machine. And I don't know where this came from. My mom said that someone bought it for me and my sister when we were younger, but it was one of those little orange and white. It wasn't Fisher Price, but it probably wasn't much of a step up past that. And it was orange and white. And I remember we were doing a project in 6th grade, and we were going to make kind of like costumes. We were big into Star Trek at the time, and we wanted to make like these V-shaped pullover things to wear over our clothes for our presentation. And so I wanted to just like sew them together, and then maybe fold under the edge, and so that was my idea. But I couldn't figure out how to make the machine, so there were no adults supervising us. I mean, I'm Gen X. That was the story of our life. We kind of did things that were more or less dangerous. I don't remember where we got the fabric. We may have walked to the fabric store, which was probably about a mile from my house, because that's what we did. So I remember like I got the whole machine threaded and I was super excited. I was like, yes, I figured out how to make the thread go through the things and then go up and down and through the arm and then got it threaded in the needle. And then I turned it on and I started sewing and it didn't catch because I didn't know about the bobbin. I didn't know that was a crucial element. And since there were no adults around to tell me that, I think we ended up using some stitch witchery that we found someone's mom had and just ended up ironing the costumes together. They didn't look great, but sixth grade class project about planets and it was what it was. So I don't remember that we got a bad grade, but that was my first like real attempt to sew. And then I didn't try again until college when I decided to major in textile and apparel design, which go figure, it probably would have helped and I probably would have done a lot better had I learned to sew in high school, like a lot of the other people in my program. But let me know when you started sewing, did you take home ec? I feel like I went to high school overseas, so we didn't have home ec. We were in Cyprus and, just the basic curriculum is all we got because, it was a smaller international school. And I was probably the only one there who wanted to learn how to sew. Anyway, I'm kind of jealous of people who got to, take home ec. I feel like I probably could have convinced my mom to do it. I didn't get to take it in junior high because I had to take computers instead because it was 1987 and everyone needed to know how to use a computer back then, back when they were, 40 pounds for a portable computer. So moving forward, when I started my path into sewing and I took, my intro sewing classes, they weren't great. It's funny because my friend's son is now in the same program that I took back in the day. And I was like, so was sewing one, like, you pick a pattern and then you learn how to sew it? And he goes, no, we make our own patterns in sewing one. And I'm like, wow, that program's gotten so much better than when I went through it back in the 90s. But when I did it, we picked a pattern. I know that for my first sewing class, we did a skirt was our first project. And I picked a A-line skirt that had a slit in it. I don't know why I picked something with a slit because that did not look good. Not that the pattern didn't look good, but it was more that my sewing of that slit did not look good. And then it had a side seam zipper, and I put in a perfect side seam zipper on the wrong side of the skirt. So there were some marks taken off for that. But I think the biggest problem I made with that skirt was that I used interior fabric to make it instead of apparel fabric. So it was kind of a slightly shiny, I think it was a cotton sateen. So it wasn't like horrible, but the weight was wrong for clothes. It was probably better suited for curtains. It was like bright blue with this big rose pattern. And it was not attractive. Let's see. Donna said that she tried to add sewing class in 9th grade and a teacher said yes and then couldn't allow freshmen. Man, that's just, I just feel like if more people had opportunities to start learning sooner and how to sew, like you'd be so much further down the line now, wouldn't you? That's how I've always kind of felt. And because I lived overseas, like grandma wasn't there to kind of get me into sewing. Whereas I think if I had been here in the States and, grandma had been nearby, then it would have been one of those situations where, we would have spent time together and been able to do some sewing together, kind of like we do now, all these years later. So the second project I did for sewing one was this horrible shirt I bought because it had to have a collar and it had to have a placket down the front with buttons. And then it had to have cuffs. So it was like you had like these criteria you had to meet with whatever pattern you wanted because that's kind of what we were learning. And I don't know why I went to Walmart. I guess it was late at night and I was procrastinating. And I bought this blue chambray, which is like denim, but not denim because it's not a twill. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make a denim shirt because, that would look cool. And, I could wear it with jeans over a tank top or something like that. And that was really bad quality fabric. And every time I ripped it, like the fabric raveled back. And so my collar, when I was trying to put it on, like I couldn't get it on right. So I kept ripping it out, and then my collar kept getting narrower and narrower. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. And so that's the time when grandma actually drove over from Houston, because I was in Austin at the time, and was like, here, let me help you. And I had like no fabric left. And so I found some white, like denim or some kind of a white twill in some fabric box that grandma had given me. And so we made a collar out of the white collar and then white cuffs, which looked horrible. And I never wore this shirt. I actually had it for a long time and I threw it away. Probably when I, you know, started law school or something like that. Hey Lee, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, so that was kind of when I started. And then, even though I was not doing great, I still really liked it. I liked the idea of being able to create something that nobody else had, even if it was hideous. And I like the idea of going to a fabric store and being able to pick out, the specific pattern and some fabric to go with it. And I was super excited about that. And so, that's kind of when my I as an adult, young adult, started to kind of just really start building the love of sewing. Now, when I was very, very small, I used to hang out with grandma when she would sew, and I would sit under the table at her feet, and she got me little tiny scissors and would give me little scraps, and I just cut things out. And she always took me to the fabric store and let me touch all the fabric, which is where I think that obsession with going to fabric stores and touching everything comes from, because that was all part of, my experience with grandma. Hey, Tony, nice that you're joining us. I know you're outside of the Dallas area too. Hopefully, you are staying warm today. And so, fast forward to college, I was struggling in the pattern classes because, as you know, patterns don't really teach you how to sew. Now, they have beginner patterns now and learn to sew patterns now, which have a lot more information than they used to. That for some reason, they just didn't really have patterns like that back in the 90s. And it was more, you just tried to sew an easier pattern. So for me, that was kind of a struggle. And then I took my first draping class, which was, taking the fabric, putting it on the dress form, putting in the darts and all of that kind of stuff. And then you make your own patterns from that. And that's when I really realized how much I loved sewing, because I was like, this is amazing. You can drape the fabric on the dress form and then you can, turn it into your own pattern. Now, the problem was I hadn't taken pattern making because I took the courses out of order. So I should have waited till the spring to take pattern making one, but I was so excited about being in the fashion program at UT that I was like, I am taking draping in the fall. And so my patterns were not great. I did not realize that, you kind of have to like join the front armhole seam to the back armhole seam and make sure that that curve is all continuous. And I didn't match my seams and make sure they were at the same length on both pattern pieces. So it kind of depended on what my fabric, how I cut the fabric and how long it was. Like that's how long the inseam was going to be. So it was kind of a mess, but I really, really loved it. I still love draping. It is not something that I do quite as regularly, but it was so much fun. So that's when I just kind of was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to power through. I got mostly B pluses, so I didn't ever do horrible, but I was not an A plus student by any means. Let's see. I loved home ec, bought my first sewing machine right out of high school. Singer Touch and Sew, loved it. Sewing about 50 years. Awesome. I don't know your first name, so I'm just going to call you DA. And thank you for sharing. I love my Bernina. This is my very first sewing machine that I got for my 21st birthday. She has served me well. I do not like using other machines. I love her so much that I used to take her to class with me. I'd like get on the bus with my little sewing machine and use it in my sewing lab, because I didn't like, they had Berninas, but they were older Berninas and they just got real finicky sometimes. And I love my machine. And, when I was in grad school, I took her to class with me for all my sewing projects as well. So, it's kind of one of those things. Um, and now you have two Berninas. I know, I love a Bernina. If you are unhappy with your machine and you're looking for a new machine, I highly recommend Berninas. They have a lot of them out there. Um, they have refurbished ones that you can get. And even if it's an older model, this is a 1080, they're great. My friend actually got rid of hers because she was upgrading to a super fancy quilting Bernina, and so I bought that, so I have a backup Bernina. At some point, I'm gonna not always be in one place, and so I'll have one to leave at home and one to travel with me. And so that's just my favorite machine. If you're looking for something new, vintage Singers are very good. Featherweights in particular tend to really hold up. I know a lot of you have commented that sometimes you have some machines that are not as good. Like Singer doesn't. I've heard a lot of complaints about the modern Singer machines that they don't work as well as they used to, and there are tension problems, and it's kind of hard for beginners. So Margie said, Bernina seems loud. You like brothers so quiet. My sister has a brother. She just started quilting a few years ago and, got a brother quilting machine. So it's got the platform and the walking foot and all that good stuff. And she absolutely loves it. And so, brother makes good machines too. I have kind of a throwdown brother for, some basic type sewing. And it's in my earlier videos if you go back and watch some of those. But I think that, sewing is one of those things that once you kind of get into it and you get past the initial learning curve, so let's say that you kind of got the hang of how to use your machine, you've got a good machine, so it's not fighting you constantly, because I think that's another problem that a lot of people had or have. I know that, a lot of the women in my family who took home ec still have PTSD from home ec because it was just so foreign to them at the time. And, in the case with my mom and my aunt, my grandma helped as much as she could. But, obviously you're supposed to do it by yourself. So, people have mixed feelings about that. I have heard from a lot of you that you've had fantastic home ec classes. And I had a comment on one of my videos, and someone said that it was 4 years of high school, and then her senior year, she had couture sewing and tailoring. And I'm just like, wow, that's better than what I learned in college back in the day. So, but I think with sewing, it's one of those things where once you kind of get into it, you really kind of start appreciating it and falling in love with it. And I've done a bunch of different things. I mean, now I mostly sew with commercial patterns. I have a few indie patterns that I'm going to use at some point, but I feel like I need to trace them off because they're so expensive and I can't replace them for $1.99 when, the big four are on sale at the local Joann's. But, it's just one of those things. I mean, I've made costumes from scratch, and that kind of brings me into my next point of when I realized that I really have to sew or my soul will die. And I was working in civil litigation. So I do traffic now. I did traffic for a long time. It's just, going to court, talking to people, super easy. And then I got bored with that and decided, oh, I want to do civil insurance defense. I don't know why. And that was mostly just sitting at a computer reading medical records, which is boring, very boring, especially when my entire legal training had been in the courtroom. And now all of a sudden I'm sitting in an office by myself reading medical records for hours and hours and hours. And it was during that time I had just changed. I worked for a major insurance company, and then I switched over to a private boutique firm, which had a lot more high-end insurance companies and bigger policies. So it was more stress from that end. And I was doing costuming for Night Court, which I have mentioned before. And I was making these Greek gods costumes, and I was draping them on my dress form. And it was 1:30 in the morning, and I'm doing my draping, and I'm holding my fabric and being tell me what you want to be. How do you want to do? And I knew the people in the show very well because they were friends of mine, and I knew kind of what their preferences were, maybe like subconsciously. And so I remember I was draping a dress, I was draping the costume for my friend Ashley. And I was like, "Ooh, I'm going to do this one backless. Like, I'm going to do like a halter neck, and it's going to have this scoop back with a cowl at the bottom, and then the skirt's going to be gathered on." And I'm just doing this by hand, like, and like totally in the zone, totally in the flow, and loving it. And the next time I look at the clock, it's like 2:30 in the morning, and I'm like, I have to be at work at 9. And at the time, I was billing 40 hours a week, which meant I was probably working about 55 hours a week to get that 40 hours. And I realized that sewing and creating and using beautiful fabrics was like the one thing that I would do no matter what time it was, no matter how tired I was, no matter what other things I had to do, because I loved it that much. And it was such an intrinsic part of me. It had become that at that point. And so I just realized, like, I've got to do something different because this job is not what I want to do. It's not who I want to be. And I have to be able to do more sewing and get into that. And so that's kind of when I decided to leave that job, go back to my old job in traffic, which was a lot less stress and a lot less time that was committed because I didn't have like a certain number of hours or anything. I could just go to court, do my job, then I'm done. So I'd have my evenings free and my weekends free, and I wasn't traveling, and I could start sewing again. And it was like this incredible realization that, wow, like I feel like I'm starting to feel alive again. Like I'm starting to find myself again. And it was such a weird experience because I wasn't like thinking that I was lost, but I found that the more time I spend in my sewing room, the happier I feel. And the less time I spend it here, I just start getting like down. And let me know what you think. So Lee has said that she's still scarred from home ec. I know that, Lee, you are one of those people that I think of when I talk about trauma from home ec. But let me know what you think. I mean, like, have you had this experience where you are doing something in your life that's not exactly what you want to do, and you've used sewing to like fill that creative gap that nothing else can really fill? And so to just finish my story, I went back to traffic, and I did that for about a year, and then the pandemic hit. And I was like, "Oh man." And I got laid off because all the courts closed. And I was like, "Oh, what am I going to do?" So while I was looking for another job, of course, jobs were really scarce during that time, especially in the legal field with all the courts being closed, and they had not figured out like how to put everything on Zoom yet. I mean, that was about 6 to 8 months coming after the pandemic. Um, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go sew. I'm going to go sew because sewing always makes me feel better. And, I made a skirt, and I'm like, oh, that was good. And then I was like, you know what? I just started building my website for So Lounge, and I was like, met some people online who were other creatives doing, creative endeavors online, and I was like, maybe I should start a YouTube channel, and maybe I should help people learn to sew or get back into sewing. And it was kind of nebulous at the time because it was like, oh, let's do beginner sewing, because I don't know, that was my idea at the time. And I felt like a beginner because I had not really been sewing regularly prior to that because, work gets in the way. And, even though my traffic job was a lot less stressful, it was still a job, still somewhere you had to go. So suddenly when the 9 to 5 is gone, and I realized that I could just sit and sew all day and then make videos about sewing. I was like, this is fantastic. You know, this is my dream job of being able to just, enjoy my sewing machine and my time in my sewing room. Let's see, Karen left a comment. Karen says, I'm a teacher and my love of sewing motivates me to be more efficient with lesson planning so I have more time to sew. Win win. I love it. I love it. I thankfully just work at one courthouse now. And when I am done there, I am done for the day. So depending on how big the docket is or what's happening, with the officers on that day, I can get done as early as like 10 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes it is at, 3:30. So it just kind of depends, but it's one of those things where I'm trying to figure out now at this point, like, okay, I know that Mondays and Tuesdays are long days at court. Wednesday is lunchtime, I get finished. And then Thursday and Friday kind of tend to fluctuate depending on what's going on with the docket. So, but I'm usually done by 10:30. So it's like, okay, now what can I do to prioritize my sewing and do it more efficiently? So one thing I was thinking of is cutting a whole bunch of stuff all at once and get back into my whole system of batch tasking sewing, because the most I've ever sewn was in July of 2021. I made like 6 different garments during that month. But the thing I did was cut everything out first. So I had all my patterns cut, I got all my fabric laid out, cut it all out, marked everything, and then I have these big kind of wire bins. So I just put each project with the pattern, with all the pieces in each bin, and then that way I could just sit down and like sew the thing. And it made it so much faster. I'm like, why haven't I been doing that? Like, so far this year, I have not done a whole lot of sewing because I've been making videos, but then also because I've been like, starting and stopping projects. So I don't like to have a bunch of stuff that's unfinished. I don't like having these unfinished projects hanging around. So I did finish a couple of them. I am almost done fixing this skirt, which you may remember from the blue apron front that looked awful. It's my fruit skirt. And then this piece that looks really bad in the front, and nobody wants to wear it. So what I decided to do, because what the easiest thing to do was to just move the loop, move the hole that the ties feed through. So it was at this seam, and I moved it to this seam. So you can see, there we go. Moved it to this seam. And so all I have to do is finish stitching this one kind of together so that it doesn't come out. And then it will wrap with the fruit on the front, and this other fabric will just peek out a little tiny bit, and problem is solved, and that's winning. So that is what I'm working on now. I have a linen jacket that I'm working on so that I can bring you another video with Grandma making bound buttonholes. If that is something you already know how to do, I am jealous. Grandma has been talking to me about bound buttonholes since I was in college. And back then I'm like, why would I do that? My machine makes beautiful buttonholes. And actually back then I didn't even put buttons on anything because I didn't want to make buttonholes because it was traumatic. Even though my Bernina makes beautiful buttonholes, I avoided a lot of things in my designs for grades because I didn't want to get a bad grade. So none of my designs had set-in sleeves. They either had raglan sleeves or they had kimono sleeves because I could get that. I had that down. Everything had an invisible zipper because that's what I learned to sew and do it really, really well. So I never make lapped zippers or, forget about a fly zipper, like a front fly zipper. I still don't know how to do that. I mean, like, I can figure it out, but I've never actually done one of those. At some point I'm going to need to, but it's, I that's what I did. So learning bound buttonholes was not a priority back in college, but now I'm kind of like, I'd really like to know how to do that. And I'd really like Grandma to teach me because, that was the way you made bound buttonholes when she learned in home ec, because the machines didn't make buttonholes for you. I mean, they might have been some, but what she said was like, no, you had to make bound buttonholes. There wasn't any way around it. Like, unless you're going to hand sew like a buttonhole, but she's like, a bound buttonhole looks so much better. So that will be something coming up probably next month because that is her birthday month. And we are going to be having a live stream next month with Grandma. She doesn't know this yet, but I'm gonna convince her to come and hang out with us and talk about her sewing experiences when she first started sewing and all that good stuff, kind of going through her history and different things like that. And she'll be giving wonderful tips, of course, because grandma is always full of sewing tips. And be sure to join in for that. So I want to hear from y'all though. Like, I have a few people participating, but I would love to know, like, when did you realize that sewing was your thing? You know, um, for me, it kind of was off and on, and now I know. Now I know for sure. But I've always loved it. So it is definitely something that I'll keep doing and encourage others to do, because if you used to sew and haven't gotten back to it for a while, there is a learning curve. I will tell you that. The first couple of things I made, I'm like, why did I make that way? It looks so bad. But I worked it out. And the funny thing is when I made those videos making those early things, I cut out all the parts where I did it wrong and where I had to keep seam ripping. And I realized in hindsight that would have been a much better video to see me figure it out along, with you. But that just it didn't occur to me at the time that anybody would want to watch a video where someone's messing up. So I do show my mistakes now. And thankfully, they are not quite as extreme in that I do not have to do quite as much ripping as I used to. But I think we can all agree that seam ripping is a part of life. So Norma said she stepped away until her 40s. Wish I could have learned from my grandma. But like you said, didn't live close. Yeah, I would have really liked to have learned from grandma. I mean, I just think that would have been fun. And, I have learned a lot from grandma since I started sewing in college. So I still got some of it. And she's still with me. So we've still got some more time. Grandma will actually be turning 99 on March 8th. So that's another reason I thought it'd be really fun to have her here to hang out with all of us. And, she's awesome. She still drives, which is crazy. And, but she doesn't go far. So that's all good. And she's very independent. So anyone else have any comments? What do you think? When did you love it? Did you have home ec? Do you like your machine? So many questions. I can keep talking. Let me have some coffee first, though, because I have been talking for almost 32 minutes straight now. And, so I love fabric. Oh, let's see. Okay, so Tony, who's up in the Dallas area, said, you started sewing at 7, hemming doll dresses on mom's treadle machine. That's really cool. I would, like I said, I think 10 was when I really started having the interest in doing it. And then attempted it at 11 because that was 6th grade. And, but then once again, I didn't have a machine. And when we moved overseas, I was interested in it, but my mom had this singer from the 70s, which she hated, and she constantly would fight with it. She would occasionally make us costumes and things like that. That was like my extent of my mom sewing. Like she'd cut something out in a shape and then like sew it up. But she hated it, and she was constantly fighting with it. And she's like, no, you're not using the sewing machine, because if you use it, you're going to hate sewing. You're never going to want to do it. And I don't want to crush that dream of yours. And so that was one of the reasons I got this Bernina for my 21st birthday, was because my mom was very adamant in getting me a good sewing machine, so that the sewing machine wouldn't be the reason I didn't want to sew anymore. It would be more, my personal choice. So okay, so the Feral Farm Guard saying she is afraid of her machine. I hand sew everything, need to learn sewing machine sewing to save time. I do enjoy the slow stitching while watching movies, etc. though. I really like embroidery. That's what I do. Like I rewatch Bridgerton a lot because it's pretty. I love the costumes. They're so colorful. And I like to just sit there and like do some embroidery because I feel like I'm with them in those times. And then, I like hand sewing now that I know how to use a thimble. And, but I don't think I could hand sew an entire outfit. That would just like, oh my gosh, that would take forever. So, Feral Farm Girl, since I don't know your first name, I would say, go watch some YouTube videos. I mean, they don't even have to be mine. There are a lot of videos out there. I do have beginner videos. They're from 2021. They're some of my earlier videos, so they're a little bit longer. And it is what it is. They're older videos, but they do show you how to get it threaded, how to do a drop-in bobbin or a front load bobbin, different basic stitches, how to get used to it. I know that my sister was afraid of sewing because of the pedal. Like that's was the thing that for her, just like she's like, oh, you can just go out of control. And I'm like, it's your foot that's the pressure. You realize that, right? So her machine, she can just set it for the speed she wants. And then it just sews the speed. It doesn't change. You don't have to use the foot pedal. And there's a lot of machines out there like that right now. If that's something that is part of the terror of sewing, is that, that out of control foot pedal. So you might want to look into that. But please let me know if you have any questions about sewing and using your machine, because I love to hear from all of you. And you can always email me at hello@sewsewlounge.com. I'm here to answer questions. I love getting emails from my viewers and offering suggestions when you need them, or trying to help out with projects if you have problems. So I would say that's totally up to you, but you are welcome to email me and or leave a comment under a video if you've got a question. So let's see who else. DA is saying she made a satin-lined wool off-white coat for her mom in the 80s, and then the house flooded, and there's a mud line halfway up the coat. Oh my gosh, that is terrifying. Oh my gosh, that's so sad. I am sorry to hear that. That is a horrible experience. There was a mud line halfway up the coat. I quit, and I do quilts and bags now, and occasionally a top. Yeah, I have not had that horrible experience. Wow, flooding. Yeah, that's a serious problem here in Houston. My neighborhood has flooded. It flooded 3 times in the first year, like major flood events. And I'm in 100-year floodplain, and it flooded 3 times in the first year and a half that I lived here. So that was terrifying. But thankfully, it does not come into the house. It gets close, but it doesn't come in. So I can understand that. Okay. So back with for Feral Farm Girl, I did it. Skirt with lining, pockets, aprons, line shirts, corsets. I'm crazy. I think it's the noise that bugs me on the spectrum. Always lost on threading the machine. Yeah. There are quieter machines. As someone pointed out earlier in this live stream, Brothers are quieter than Bernina's. My Bernina's not, I wouldn't say it's super loud, because I have a domestic vintage machine that is really, really loud, but it has like 1 horsepower motor. So, it can sew leather. The Bernina's a little bit, you might want to try a Brother and see if that has a nice, quieter kind of sound that makes you more comfortable when you sew. And then coming up, let's see. Makey says that she started sewing 10 years ago, never looked back. Everyday life, I'm a psychologist, and I'm contemplating taking a step back for my health, but also to be able to sew more. Yeah, my sister is a child clinical psychologist, and that's why she started quilting, because she works on an inpatient unit, a lot of suicide attempts with the kids that she works with, and it gets really heavy. And so she took up quilting because she was like, I need something creative that I can just not think about work with. So I think a lot of people find that, sewing and creating with fabric is like a really good way to kind of get out of your head and focus on something that's just really calming and relaxing. Diane saying, 20 years old, taught myself to sew in an old Singer treadle machine. Now I'm 80 and still love to sew. Well, Diane, that's awesome. I've seen treadle machines in museums, but I have never actually tried one. I know that they are a lot of fun. I tend to have, my calves are on the large side, so I do not ever need a calf workout like that. But I think it would be cool to have one. I do collect vintage sewing machines, so I'm running out of space. I need like a bigger room to be able to store everything and be able to use everything. So the Feral Farm Girl says, I sold my treadle when I lost my home and I regret it. Yeah, that might have been a good option for you with the noise thing, because then it's fairly quiet, right? Norma is enjoying all of the stories. Thank you for saying that, Norma. That is kind of the point of this. It's not really to talk about me the whole time. So I love it when you guys have you get involved and have some comments. So Mikey said that, oh, Mikey works with criminals in an inpatient setting, also intensive, but children are very intensive. Yes. So I can understand that being difficult and, very draining. I do criminal law, but it's traffic tickets. So, they're pretty much everyday criminals. I could not do real criminal law with actual criminals, because I think that would just really it would be too hard on me emotionally. Like, I can't watch a lot of Law and Order episodes in a row, like when they have those Saturday watch-a-thons, because then I get really stressed out and sad and anxious. And let's not do that. Let's focus on sewing. And another thing I was thinking about with sewing is just kind of the mindfulness quality of it. I read a book about mindfulness, and I was kind of aggravated because they didn't talk about sewing specifically. They only talked about knitting. And I think that sewing can fall into that category. It's a little bit more thought-provoking than knitting, because you're not just doing the same stitch over and over and over until you get to whatever your project is, But I think that the act of sewing and, cutting the fabric and then pinning it all together and then, sewing your seam and then going and pressing it open and then moving on to the next step is a very mindful kind of activity, even if it's not taking a walk and thinking about the steps you're taking, or trying to meditate. I think there's a meditative quality to sewing once you kind of get in the zone when you're kind of doing whatever it is you're doing and whatever you're making. So let's see. Feral Farm Girl says the only thing wrong with the treadle was the lever band was stretched out. There is, if you get online, there are some different companies that have a lot of random sewing equipment. I think it's called A1 Sewing Center. I think that's it. I'll put the link in the description once I go find it. I found them online, and I got a bunch of new pieces for my domestic sewing machine, which was made in 1944. And if you just kind of email the guy and be like, hey, I have this sewing machine, I need a new part for X, Y, and Z, then he emails you back a list of what you need to buy with the links, because it's kind of hard to operate his website, but he's super, super knowledgeable about all sewing machines. So, if you need I needed a new pedal for a foot pedal for my featherweight, because the one I had, my grandfather had duct taped together so many times, it was just duct tape around wire. Like, the original plastic was gone. And so, that's a good source to have if you have older machines. I don't know if he goes all the way back to treadles, but just for future reference, like I said, I will put a link in the description below once I go look that up and figure out what the name is. But I think it's A1. I think that's what I'm thinking of. So, and then Michelle Renee has a suggestion for Feral Farm Girl. Have you ever tried wearing noise canceling earplugs while you sew on a machine? Also, those headphones, they are like the ear muff kind of ones, if you don't like putting things in your ears. So maybe that would help, or try a quieter machine too. We all want you to get back to sewing. That's the reality, and get on that machine so you can make more beautiful things and not have to hand sew every single thing. Let's see. Mikey says, I agree. To me, it is meditative. I cannot sew distracted. Seam ripper every time. Yeah, I know. And some days it's like you get on, you're like, okay, I'm going to go sew. And it's like you're just out of sync. And it's like, for me, it's when I have other stuff going on and I just keep thinking about that and not focusing on the sewing. And then that's when the seam ripper comes out, right? So I try and leave it at the door and not bring it into my sewing room, but sometimes it's hard. So I think that, definitely some days it's just it's not working. It's I just need to stop and I need to go do something like cut out patterns, because then it doesn't matter. There's nothing to mess up. You just stay on the line, follow it around. Sometimes I'll use a rotary cutter to do that, to speed up that process. But when I'm really agitated and too many things on my mind, too much going on, then I will sit down with a pair of scissors and a paper pattern and just cut. And that also kind of helps me calm down and kind of like get those nagging thoughts out of my head. Let's see. Okay, Feral Farm Girl has a no, Michelle. I think I just need to get over it. I now have a project for a friend that I have to sew. It's a quilt using royal crown bags. LOL. You know, I actually saw one of those at the rodeo here in Houston, like many years ago, and I was like, wow, that is a lot of royal crown to drink. So hopefully your friend's been collecting them over the years, or you have a bunch of friends who are all working on it together, because that's a lot of little bags of Crown Royal. But best of luck with that, because it is one of those things that, you know, it's a lot of little tiny pieces. But I guess you get two, one on each side, right? So anyway, um, yeah, the mindfulness aspect of like figuring out what the better thing to do with, depending on how you're feeling. So, like I said, paper patterns, it's a good thing to do and cut out at the time when the sewing isn't quite clicking together. And like I never decide to put in a zipper unless I've been sewing for a couple of hours. And you know, another thing that I've found that really helps when you're having a hard time focusing because you've got all these other, you know, noises or thoughts and things in your head is to just do something really, really basic. Like if you have something that's made and you're like, oh, I can go finish those side seam, you know, finish the seams on it with, you know, your serger or, you know, your machine, and just do something that's not really like super thought provoking. Like trying to sew darts evenly or put in zippers or get that neckline in just the right curve like you need. So, what do you do? Does anyone have any thoughts on, you know, what you do when you're not really feeling super focused? I mean, do you just stop and go do something else and go on to another day? For me, I find like the sewing will help with the agitation and the swirling of the thoughts. I don't know what to call it because it's not like it's anything major. It might just be like something that happened at court or was aggravated by a client or maybe a prosecutor or something like that. And it's just kind of still in my head and I just keep replaying it. I'm like, I need to just get rid of that. So what can I do to, you know, move on to something else, but not really do anything that I could mess up really badly and have to restart. So, you know, but I'd like to know what your thoughts are if anyone has any on that. I was, you know, I made a video about pressing that came out last Sunday. And if you watched it, thank you for watching. If you left me a comment, even better. It's going viral for me. It's at like 26,000 views as of this morning. And so thanks to all of you who helped make that happen, because that's very exciting for me. It's my first video to go this far in such a short period of time. But one of the things I was talking about in the video was being careful when you press seams if you're serging them before you press. And I had serged the seams on my linen jacket, or on the top I was making, I had serged the seams before I put in, before I pressed the seam allowance. I was using a press cloth to just be careful because I have had serger thread melt on me in the past. So I was working on this week's video where I'm going to show you my favorite sewing tools. And that way I was using my Dritz Easy Hem and didn't think like maybe I should use a press cloth. And I did actually melt my serged edge. So I just decided, since it was on the sleeve and I really don't need it to be serged because I'm doing a double fold to finish the sleeve, I just cut it off. But I did melt it. So it does happen, because somebody said, does that really happen? Yes, it really happens. Now, the caveat is my serger thread is from Hancock Fabrics. So if you remember Hancock Fabrics, then you also probably remember when they ceased to exist. So maybe it's time to get some new serger thread and upgrade. But it was a really good price back then. It was like $1.99 a spool. And since you need 4, it was a good deal. So if anybody has a source for serger thread that does not melt, I would love to know. Please let me know. Leave it in the comments. But just because I did mention that in the pressing video and people were like, does that really happen? Yes, it does. It just happened. And thankfully, it wasn't a huge mess. It was just like a little tiny bit that I got on my garment. And it's going to be on the inside, so not a problem. And then it was just a little bit on the iron that I was able to clean quickly. So Karen says, keeping a sewing journal with swatches and sketches, it's always something I'm ready to work on. That's a really good idea. I I need to do that, and I just do other things that are more related to, ideas for videos and that kind of stuff. And Feral Farm Girl says, awesome. Congrats, Tony. Thank you. Yes, it's kind of crazy. I look at that number. It was at 17 yesterday morning. So it is kind of fun. And, hopefully y'all all continue to watch my videos because I'm making them for you, the people who like to come and hang out with me and watch these videos and interact. So I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate your support. And I also appreciate you commenting and getting involved so that we can kind of create a space where, we can all come together and talk about our love of sewing. Because I think that, that's one thing that doesn't really happen with sewing for sewists. Like quilters have quilting bees and they still get together and quilt things together. Like I have a friend, she primarily does quilting, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to take my extra scrap fabric to my quilting bee if you don't want any of it. And I was like, you have a quilting bee? Why are there no sewing bees? Like, why are there no sewing bees? I would like to do that, but I don't know anybody else in Houston other than my grandma who sews clothing. I'm trying to get my sister into it, so maybe we could have a bee of two. But that's one thing, like the whole idea of So Lounge came into existence when I was in college, and we would all be in the sewing lab together and we'd be talking and being like, hey, what do you think of this? Or how should I finish this hem? And, what do you think of this collar? And all that kind of stuff. And it was so collaborative and it was just really fun. And it was like this little sewing community. And I absolutely loved it. And I was like, oh, that's what So Lounge would be. So Lounge would be a community of women getting together and sewing, and men, if there are any men watching. If you want to be part of the community, you totally can. And just support one another and have, because a lot of people don't sew. And so in your real life, you may not have any friends who sew, which is sad. Because back in the day, everybody used to have to sew because, I know that home ec was required in some places. I know that's why my friend Lee had to take it, because it was required. Same for my mom and my aunt. It was not an option to not take home ec. So, but that was kind of the whole idea of this. So I appreciate you all being here and being part of this, because that was my whole goal, is to create a place where you can come and chat and talk about your experiences. And let's see. Okay. Feral Farm Girl says, I don't like today's clothes. Cheaply made, too expensive, doesn't fit right. 100%. 100%. Every time I go to the store, and I don't really shop for clothes anymore because I have 12 suits and they all fit, and I just keep re-wearing them. And I've been wearing them for like the last, I don't know, 8 to 10 years, because I bought them, they fit, they're great. That's it. We're done. And I have a bunch of tops from, Ann Taylor and Banana Republic that are just solid color knit tops, and they all fit. And, that's what I stick with, because clothing is not made like it used to be. Fast fashion is really fast and really, really poorly made. Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon or from, Shein or Wish or Temu, and get a cocktail dress for like $50. But when you get that and looked at it, it's not going to be well made at all. So I totally agree with you on that. I do shop occasionally. I have bought some stuff when I've traveled, and that are like these one of a kind pieces, and I'm like, that is awesome, I love it. But then I'll wear that for like 10 years. I'm not going to go swap it out and get something else. I'm not a huge fan of that. I believe in classic design with really colorful fabric, so it's very unique to you. That is my aesthetic. And let's see, what's Jolita saying? Jolita saying, I learned to sew and home ec in high school. Now I have a brother sewing embroidery machine. I'm afraid of it after making embroidery towels for my family's birthday presents last year. Don't be afraid, Jolita. Don't use the embroidery function. Just use it to sew. That's much easier. Like if you got the embroidery down to make some embroidered towels, you are ahead of the curve. So you just need to work on some basic stuff, and then you're going to feel better about it. I promise you, you will. So, yeah, sewing, I love it. what can I say? I've been talking about this nonstop for 54 minutes now. Wait, we've got 54 minutes. So we're coming up on, it's 10:55 here in Houston, Texas, Central Standard Time. And it's time to do free pattern giveaway. So I have not one, but two of these. This is New Look 62, 63. I am going to be doing a sew along with this in April because March is a little bit busy. This pattern is size 8 to 18. I've heard that New Look sewing patterns are not as size inclusive as some of the standard Big Four patterns. So this is just what it is. I can't change it. And I bought some extras when I bought the patterns for my pattern haul back in January because a viewer in Australia wanted me to do a sew along and I didn't have the pattern because New Look patterns are surprisingly hard to find. So if you would like to be entered into the random drawing that I'm getting ready to do to win a pattern, leave a comment below. This is just for the people on the live stream. If you're watching the replay, I am sorry. You will have to join us live next time. I'm going to try and give away something every month, every live stream, just some little fun sewing thing or pattern, or I haven't really decided what it is for each month. So I might let Grandma decide for next month since it is going to be a Grandma themed. We'll see what maybe Grandma's favorite sewing tool. We might do that and give that away. But if you want to win this pattern and you have two chances, let me know in the comments below right now while we're chatting. I'll keep talking a little bit longer. Just leave a little comment that says yes. And then I'm going to, based on the number of yeses, put those numbers into the random number generator from Google and pick two people. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do this. If you want to win a free pattern, I will mail it wherever you are. So even if you're in the Netherlands, just let me know. So, okay. I'm going to try and do this as best as I can. Like, it's got to grab a little pad. I should have planned. I was like sitting here, like working on my skirt and doing some hand sewing before I started this live stream. So, okay. Okay, so let me see. So, go back up a little bit. So, we're going to start with Margie because you are going to be number one. And then let me know if you would like to win. So Norma, you just have nice, I don't know if you're interested. Oh yeah, there you are. Okay. So I'm just going to go down the list and write everybody's name out. And then I will random number generate and take out whoever won. Brenda S. Alteration and sewing. And I apologize, my new comments. Oh, wow, it's like a lot of y'all. I'm like super excited. So, okay, Jane Doe, do you want to be in it? Oh, there you are down there. Okay, I see. Okay, so Norma did say yes. Thank you, Norma. Makey in the Netherlands. Yvonne. I know this is taking a sec, so bear with me. Jolita. Jane Doe. Okay. TT, Seamstress Nancy. Thank you, Seamstress Nancy. I'm glad you joined in. Thank you for watching the replay. I'm glad you like my channel. So TT is there. And then we have, oh wait, hold on. I missed Nancy. As Nancy. Alicia. And then we have Brenda. I think I have you in there twice, Brenda. Let me double check. Yes. Okay, so we're not going to do Brenda. Okay, so starts with Margie, ends with Alicia. That is going to be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So good odds today. Okay, so I'm going to flip over to my number generator. Max is going to be 14, and we are going to generate. And let me do this again. Hold on. Minimum is 1. Maximum is going to be 14. Generate. Okay, so looks like number 2 is going to be our first winner. So that is going to be Tony Stanley. So that's winner number 1. Number 1. And then we are going to do, let's see what we can generate next. Oops, I might have to redo this. Now we have number 7 as our next one, which is going to be, if we take out Tony, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that is going to be Norma Kaufman. So winner number 2 is going to be Norma Kaufman. So if you have won, congratulations. Make sure you send me an email at hello@SoSoLounge, because I don't have your mailing addresses. Please send your mailing address to my email, and that way I can mail this to you. If you did not win, thank you for joining in the live stream. I am so excited that you were all here, and I will be doing giveaways at other live streams. So be sure to join in. I'm going to do a better job of, Margie was sweet and congratulated the winners. Thank you, Margie. And what I was going to say is, if you did not know about the live stream and you just happened to see it come up and join, I'm going to put a link in the description under this video so that you can sign up for the newsletter, which is the way to get the link in advance, know what the topic is, and know what the giveaway is going to be. Because that's pretty much the only email I send once a month. So you will not be bombarded in your inbox. I'm not great at sending emails, but I have committed to sending one a month in conjunction with the live stream. So you'll get a foreshadowing of the topic and the free giveaway for the month. And like I said, next month is going to be Grandma. I think I'm going to let Grandma pick the free giveaway, and we will see what she chooses. And then I hope you all join. It is so much fun to do this once a month. And if you're watching on the replay, still let me know where you are. Still let me know what your home ec experience was and why you love sewing, because I read all my comments and I answer all of them. And be sure to sign up for the newsletter so you get advance notice of the next live stream, which will be in March with Grandma. And I can't wait to see all of you there. Thank you so much. Oh, Mikey said, congrats to everyone. Liked it very much today. Would love to see Grandma. Grandma is so much fun. If you have not watched my videos with Grandma, there are 2 out there. I'm sewing sleeves with one with her. We're sewing sleeves, and she showed me how to put in a set-in sleeve, and now I've got it down. And the other one is Tips from Grandma, which is very funny. Grandma is a total ham on camera. She's also in the I Sewed a Fleece Jacket video. She makes a cameo appearance at the end because I was making her a fleece jacket. So yes, if you have not seen those and you want to see what Grandma's like, she's so much fun to hang out with, and she's very, very funny. And it's one of those things that, like, I never thought my grandma would do so well on camera, because it is a skill. But I mean, like, she looks at the camera, she talks, it's fantastic. So I hope you can all join us then. And until then, happy sewing. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I hope you can get some sewing done. My plan is to work on my linen top so that it will be ready for bound buttonholes with Grandma. And, that's the plan anyway. So thank you all for being here. Don't forget, if you want to send me your send me your mailing addresses so I can get those out to you this week. And thanks to everyone who was here, and have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your weekend.